My name is Eleanor Anderson. I'm 56 years old and I lost my virginity at 55 to a man 23 years younger than me. I was completely convinced of the sincerity of our feelings, absolutely certain that someone could finally love me for who I was, not what I had. But my world shattered the morning I saw his text messages. "Is the old virgin signing papers yet?" one read. "She's so desperate it's pathetic," said another. And then the one that made my blood run cold. "Easiest 2.3 million I'll ever make." But what Tyrone Miller didn't know was that I had screenshots of everything. Every cruel joke, every calculated move, every victim before me. And I was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Because here's what con artists forget. Successful businesswomen don't get to 2.3 million by being stupid. We get there by being patient, strategic, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. To understand how a 55-year-old successful businesswoman could fall for a con artist, you need to understand something about loneliness. Not the kind where you miss having someone to talk to, the kind that sits in your bones for 35 years, the kind that makes you wonder if you're even capable of being loved. I built my real estate empire from absolutely nothing. Started at 20 with a $500 loan and an apartment building that should have been condemned. Worked 16-hour days, lived on ramen noodles and black coffee, turned that death trap into something people actually wanted to live in. By 30, I owned 3 buildings. By 40, I had my own development company. By 55, I was worth $2.3 million and owned a portfolio most men twice my age would envy. But I'd never been kissed. I know what you're thinking. How does that even happen? Well, let me paint you a picture of my life. My parents died in a car accident when I was 20, right before my junior year of college. One drunk driver, one moment, and I was alone. No siblings, no extended family that gave a damn, just me and a mountain of grief I had no idea how to process. So I didn't process it. I buried it. Buried it under spreadsheets and property assessments and renovation plans. Work became my family, my romance, my entire life. Friends stopped setting me up on dates around age 30 because I always canceled. Too busy, I'd say. Big deal closing. Property inspection. Client meeting. The truth? I was terrified. Terrified that if someone got close enough, they'd see what I saw in the mirror every morning. Someone fundamentally unlovable, someone whose own parents chose to die and leave her alone. I know that's not how car accidents work, but grief doesn't care about logic. By 55, I lived in a 6-bedroom mansion that echoed with emptiness. You know what I did most nights? Ate frozen dinners in front of the television in a house big enough for a family of 8. I had more square footage than I knew what to do with and absolutely no one to share it with. My sister Martha, my half-sister really from my father's first marriage, would call every few weeks out of obligation. "Eleanor, you need to get out more. You need to meet people. You can't just work yourself to death." Easy for her to say. She had a husband, 3 kids, grandchildren on the way. She had Sunday dinners and family game nights, and people who would notice if she didn't come home. I had quarterly earnings reports and property managers and a cleaning service that came twice a week to dust furniture no one ever touched. The charity auction was her idea. Well, not idea, ultimatum. "Eleanor, I'm not asking, I'm telling. You're going to the Riverside Country Club Spring Gala next Saturday and you're going to stay for the entire event. No sneaking out after an hour, no emergency work calls. You're going to socialize like a normal human being." I tried to protest. "Martha, I have a property closing on Monday. I need to review the paperwork can wait. Your life can't." Her voice softened. "Ellie, I love you, but you're disappearing and I'm watching it happen and I can't just stand by anymore." That got me. She hadn't called me Ellie since we were kids, since before our parents' accident, when the world still felt safe. So I went, put on my best dress, a navy blue number I'd bought 3 years ago and never worn, did my makeup for the first time in months, and drove to the country club feeling like an imposter, which, let's be honest, I was. I didn't belong in rooms full of couples and laughter and easy conversation. I belonged in my office, where the only thing expected of me was competence. The ballroom was exactly what you'd expect. Crystal chandeliers, women in cocktail dresses, men in expensive suits, everyone paired off like animals boarding Noah's Ark. I grabbed a glass of wine from a passing waiter and found a corner where I could observe without participating, my specialty. I watched the auction items parade across the stage, a weekend in Napa Valley, a private chef experience, golf lessons with some professional whose name I didn't recognize. People bid enthusiastically, laughing and raising their paddles, and I felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. That's when he approached me. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." I turned, and there he was, Tyrone Miller, though I didn't know his name yet. 32 years old, 6 feet tall, with the kind of smile that probably got him everything he wanted. Objectively gorgeous, the kind of man who'd never look twice at someone like me. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered in my chest. When was the last time an attractive man had spoken to me? Had one ever? Only to someone else who feels the same way. He gestured to the crowd with his wine glass. "Lot of money in this room, not a lot of genuine conversation." I laughed, surprised. "So what brings you here if you're not a fan?" "Obligation. My company does personal training for half the people here. Can't exactly skip the event they expect you at." He extended his hand. Tyrone Miller. Eleanor Anderson. His handshake was firm, warm. I probably held on a second too long. Wait, Eleanor Anderson? The Eleanor Anderson? Riverside Commons? Eleanor Anderson? My eyebrows shot up. "You know my work?" "Know it. I live in one of your buildings. The Riverside Commons development is incredible. The way you preserve the historic facade while completely modernizing the interior, that's art." I felt my face flush. When was the last time someone had complimented my work? When was the last time someone had complimented me at all? "Thank you. That project was special to me. The building had been abandoned for 15 years. Everyone said it was beyond saving, but I saw potential." That's what I thought when I first walked in. Someone saw potential where everyone else saw a lost cause. He smiled, and something in his expression made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in decades. "I'd love to hear more about it. Would you want to grab coffee sometime? I promise to talk about something other than real estate. Maybe." And just like that, for the first time in 55 years, I said yes to a date. The coffee date was supposed to be casual, meet at a cafe near my office, talk for an hour, go our separate ways, safe, controlled. The kind of thing even I couldn't screw up. I changed outfits 4 times that morning. 4 times. Like a teenager getting ready for prom, except I was a 55-year-old woman who'd never been to prom in the first place. I finally settled on a cream-colored blouse and black slacks. Professional, but not cold. Approachable, but not desperate. Who was I kidding? I was absolutely desperate. Tyrone was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. "I took a guess," he said, standing as I approached. "Vanilla latte, extra foam. But I got you regular too, just in case I was completely wrong." "The latte is perfect." It was. How did he know? "Thank you." We sat, and for the first few minutes, it was awkward. I kept adjusting my napkin, he kept fiddling with his coffee cup, and I was convinced this was a terrible mistake. Then he asked me about my first building, and something shifted. "It was this nightmare of a place on 7th Street, I said, surprised by how easily the words came. 4 stories, 12 units, absolutely falling apart. The previous owner had let it rot for a decade. Squatters, water damage, electrical that hadn't been updated since 1960. My realtor literally told me I was insane. "But you saw something," Tyrone said, leaning forward. "I saw potential. I saw what it could be, not what it was." I paused, remembering those early days. I was 20. Had no idea what I was doing, and I was so scared I'd throw up every morning before heading to the property. But I couldn't let it fail. It was all I had. What happened to make you take that risk? Most 20-year-olds aren't thinking about real estate investment. And there it was. The question I usually deflected with a joke or a subject change. But something about Tyrone's expression, genuine curiosity, no judgment, made me answer honestly. My parents died. Car accident, drunk driver, gone in an instant. I inherited some money from the life insurance. Not a lot, but enough. I could have done the sensible thing. Finished college, gotten a normal job, saved it for emergencies. But I was so angry and so alone, and I needed to prove something. That I could build something permanent. Something that couldn't be taken away in one random moment. Tyrone reached across the table and touched my hand. Just a brief touch. Nothing inappropriate. But it was the first time in years someone had offered me physical comfort. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. It was a long time ago. Grief doesn't have an expiration date, Eleanor. We talked for 3 hours. The coffee shop closed, and we moved to a nearby park, walking the paths as the sun set. He told me about his childhood in Detroit, his dreams of becoming an actor that didn't quite pan out, how he'd fallen into personal training almost by accident. Turns out I'm better at helping other people achieve their goals than achieving my own, he said with a self-deprecating laugh. When we finally said goodbye, he kissed my cheek, a brief, gentle kiss that I felt all the way to my toes. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Yes, please." I drove home with the windows down, music playing, feeling like I was floating. At 55 years old, I was going on a second date. I was being courted. I was wanted. I should have known it was too good to be true. The intervention happened over lunch at Marcello's, this Italian place where my 3 closest friends, well, only friends, gathered monthly to catch up. Diane, Patricia, and Susan had been trying to keep me socially functional for years. Bless them. I made the mistake of telling them about Tyrone. "He's 32, Diane's fork clattered onto her plate. "Eleanor, that's a 23-year age gap." "I can do math, Diane." "And he just approached you? Out of nowhere?" Patricia's expression was all concern, which somehow felt worse than judgment. "Sweetie, doesn't that seem a little convenient?" I felt my defenses rising. "What's that supposed to mean?" Susan, ever the diplomat, tried to soften it. "We just want you to be careful. You're a successful woman, you have assets, and sometimes people... You think he's after my money." I laughed, but it sounded bitter even to my ears. Of course, because why else would someone be interested in me, right? It couldn't possibly be because he finds me interesting or attractive or worth his time. "That's not what we're saying," Diane insisted. "But Eleanor, you have to admit, the age difference, the timing, the fact that he knew exactly who you were. He lives in one of my buildings. He recognized my work. Is it so impossible to believe that someone might appreciate what I've built?" They exchanged looks, those knowing, pitying looks that made me feel like a naive child. "How many dates have you been on?" Patricia asked gently. That's irrelevant." "Eleanor, how many?" I stabbed at my pasta. "This is my second, ever, including him." The silence at the table was deafening. "Sweetie," Susan said, "that's exactly why we're worried. You don't have experience with this, with dating, with men, with recognizing red flags because you've never had to. We love you, and we just want you to be careful." I am being careful. I wasn't. I'm a businesswoman. I know how to read people. "In boardrooms, yes," Diane said, "but this isn't business. This is emotions and vulnerability, and you've been alone for so long." "Exactly." I slammed my hand on the table, surprising myself. I've been alone for so long. I've been lonely for so long. And now, for the first time in my entire life, someone is showing interest in me. Someone is making me feel like I matter for reasons that have nothing to do with money or property or business acumen. And you want me to throw that away because you've decided he must have ulterior motives. We want you to protect yourself, Patricia said softly. I've been protecting myself my whole life. Maybe it's time I took a risk on something other than real estate. I threw cash on the table for my meal and left, drove home in silence, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being an idiot. Maybe Tyrone was exactly what they thought he was. But that night, when he called, I was just thinking about you, beautiful. All my doubts melted away like ice in summer sun. God, I was such a fool. But here's the thing about age gap relationships, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Would you ever date someone 23 years younger? Because society has a lot of opinions about this, especially when it's an older woman with a younger man. If you think I was naive, hit that like button. If you think my friends were being judgmental, also hit that like button. Either way, let me know in the comments what you would do in my situation. Would you trust your heart or trust your friends? I'm genuinely curious because looking back, I still don't know if I made the choice or if loneliness made it for me. The next 6 weeks were the happiest of my life. Is it pathetic to admit that? That at 55 years old, 6 weeks with a con artist were the best I'd ever had? Tyrone was perfect. Not just attractive, though he was certainly that. He was attentive. He asked questions about my day and actually listened to the answers. He wanted to know about my projects, my childhood, my dreams. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced. Our third date was at an art museum. I thought we could do something cultural, he said, and I laughed because I couldn't remember the last time I'd been to a museum for pleasure rather than a work function. We stood in front of a Monet, and he asked me what I thought. Not what I knew about the painting, not the historical context, but what I thought, what I felt. I think it's about capturing a moment before it disappears, I said. The way light changes everything, but only for a second. You have to be paying attention, or you miss it. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, I'm falling in love with you. Just like that. In front of a Monet, surrounded by strangers, he said the words I'd waited 55 years to hear. I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Our first kiss happened that night, standing in the parking lot next to my car like teenagers who couldn't wait to get somewhere private. His lips were soft, gentle, and when he pulled back to look at me, I had tears streaming down my face. Are you okay? He asked, concerned. I've never been kissed before, I admitted. I'm 55 years old, and that was my first kiss. Do you know what he did? He didn't laugh, didn't make it awkward. He just cupped my face in his hands and said, Then I'm honored to be your first, and kissed me again. I cried the whole way home. Happy tears, grateful tears. I can't believe this is real tears. A week later, he brought me flowers. Not expensive roses, wildflowers he'd picked himself. Saw these on my morning run and thought of you. Reminded me of that Monet painting. Beautiful, but you have to pay attention or you miss them. He refused expensive gifts. When I tried to buy him a nice watch for his birthday, he actually looked offended. Eleanor, I don't want your money. I want you. If I wanted a sugar mama, I could find one. I want a partner. Someone who sees me as more than a paycheck or a boy toy. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. All my insecurities, all my fears that this was too good to be true, that he must want something, he addressed them perfectly. Too perfectly. But I didn't see that then. He started staying over. First one night, then two, then most of the week. He'd cook dinner while I worked late, have it waiting when I got home. Simple things. Pasta, chicken, nothing fancy, but cooked with care. We'd eat together at my massive dining table, and for the first time, that house felt like a home. You should move in, I said one night, the words spilling out before I could overthink them. Officially, I mean. This is silly. You going back to your apartment when you're here all the time anyway? He got quiet, set down his fork. Eleanor, I worry about what people would think. You're this successful, respected businesswoman, and I'm a personal trainer who lives in a one-bedroom apartment. People already talk. They already think I'm using you. If I move in, it'll just make it worse. I don't care what people think. I care what they say about you. He reached across the table, took my hand. I don't want to be the reason people disrespect you or question your judgment. You've worked too hard for that. It was the perfect answer. The answer that made me feel protected, valued, respected. The answer that made me push harder. I want you here, Tyrone. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want this to be our home, not just mine. Please. He moved in the following weekend. Looking back, I can see exactly when the real con began. It started small, reasonable, almost thoughtful. You know what would make things easier? Tyrone said one morning over coffee. A joint account, just for household expenses. You're always sending me money for groceries or having me use your card, and it feels weird. If we had a shared account for house stuff, it would be simpler. It made sense. We lived together. We shared expenses. Why not share an account? I set it up that afternoon. Put $15,000 in as a starting balance. Figured we'd replenish as needed. Within a week, he'd taken $7,000. I noticed, of course. I didn't build a real estate empire by not paying attention to money. But when I casually mentioned it, wow, we went through a lot this week, he had explanations. I had to pay my portion of the car insurance. It was due. And I bought new workout equipment for my clients. Invested in the business, you know. Plus, I got that nice dinner for your birthday. Wanted to spoil you. All reasonable. All believable. All lies. My friends stopped calling. I didn't notice at first, too wrapped up in my new relationship, but eventually it registered that Diane hadn't texted in weeks, that Susan's monthly lunch invitation never came, that Patricia's calls had dried up. Did something happen with your friends? Tyrone asked innocently one night. They used to call all the time. I don't know. Maybe they're busy. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that Tyrone had been answering my phone when I was in the shower or working, declining their calls, sending them to voicemail, deleting messages, isolating me slowly, carefully, like a python squeezing its prey. Then came the Will conversation. We were lying in bed, that comfortable post-dinner laziness where you're too full to move but too awake to sleep, when he brought it up. This might be morbid, but I was thinking, what would happen if something happened to you? Like, God forbid, an accident or sudden illness. Do you have everything in order? A will, power of attorney, that kind of thing? I propped myself up on one elbow. I have a will. Why? I just worry. You work so hard, you're under so much stress, and if something happened, who would make medical decisions for you? Who would handle your business affairs? Martha. My sister, who lived 3 hours away and had her own family to worry about. I guess I hadn't thought about it. You should update it. Make sure everything is clear. Maybe set up a power of attorney, just in case. I'm not saying it should be me. We're not married or anything, but you should have someone who can step in if needed. He said it shouldn't be him, which of course made me immediately think it should be. Would you? If I asked you to be my power of attorney, would you do it? Eleanor, I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't. I want someone I trust, someone who knows me and cares about me, not just some lawyer or distant relative who sees me as a paycheck. Would you? He kissed my forehead. Of course. If that's what you want, I'd be honored. I called my lawyer the next day. The red flags were there. God, they were everywhere. Strange charges on our joint account that he'd explain away. Times he'd disappear for hours with vague explanations. Once I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a hotel room. Business meeting with a potential client, needed a professional space. That made my stomach churn. But I swallowed the doubt because acknowledging it meant acknowledging that maybe my friends had been right all along. I couldn't let them be right. Because if they were right about Tyrone, then I was exactly what I feared. A pathetic, lonely woman so desperate for love that she'd fall for the first man who showed her attention. So I ignored the red flags, explained them away, rationalized every inconsistency because the alternative was going back to that empty house, those frozen dinners, that crushing loneliness I'd lived with for 55 years. It happened on a Tuesday night, 3 months after we'd met. Nothing particularly special about the day. I'd closed a deal on a strip mall renovation. He'd trained clients all morning. We made dinner together, some pasta dish he'd been perfecting. We were washing dishes, and he was telling me about one of his clients who kept insisting she could bench press more than she could. So she loads up the bar, and I'm standing there ready to spot her, and he paused, turned to face me, soap suds on his hands. "Can I ask you something personal?" My heart started racing. "Of course." "Have you ever... you mentioned that first kiss was your first kiss. Have you ever been intimate with anyone?" The dish towel in my hands became the most interesting thing in the world. I couldn't look at him. "No, never." "Eleanor." He turned off the water, dried his hands, gently took the towel from me. "Look at me." I forced myself to meet his eyes, expecting pity or awkwardness or worse, amusement. Instead, I saw something that looked like wonder. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," he said softly. "That you've waited, that you've been so focused on building your life that you never let anyone close enough. That takes incredible strength." It wasn't strength, it was fear. Sometimes those are the same thing. He cupped my face in his hands. "I need you to know, there's no pressure, none. We move at your pace. If you're never ready, that's okay. I love you for who you are, not for what you might give me." I love you. He'd said it before, but it still made my breath catch. "What if I'm ready?" I whispered. "What if I've been waiting because I was waiting for you?" That night, he was patient, gentle. He asked permission for everything, checked in constantly, made sure I was comfortable. When I tensed up, he slowed down. When I relaxed, he whispered how beautiful I was, how perfect this was, how lucky he was. And when it was over, when we lay tangled together in sheets that finally felt lived in, he kissed my forehead and said, "I love you, Eleanor Anderson." "I love you too," I whispered back, and felt complete for the first time in my entire life. I fell asleep in his arms, this man who had somehow seen past all my defenses, who had made me feel worthy of love. I fell asleep thinking that maybe, just maybe, I deserved this happiness. I woke up to the sound of the shower running. The morning light was streaming through the curtains, and I stretched, feeling pleasantly sore and utterly content. I could hear Tyrone humming in the bathroom, some pop song I didn't recognize. I smiled, threw on a robe, and headed to the kitchen to make breakfast. To do something domestic and couple-like and normal. I was going to make him pancakes. From scratch, because that felt important somehow. A celebration of this new chapter in our lives. His phone was on the counter, face down. It buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I wasn't going to look. I respected privacy. I trusted him. But then it buzzed again, and the screen lit up just enough that I could see a name. Jessica. 3 new messages. Jessica. He'd mentioned her once, a friend from his acting days, someone he'd known for years, nothing to worry about. The phone buzzed again. Is the old virgin signing papers yet? My hand froze halfway to the flour canister. I stared at those words, displayed on the lock screen preview. Surely I'd misread. Surely that wasn't... The phone was in my hand before I could think. His passcode was my birthday. He'd made such a sweet gesture of it. So I never forget the day I met you. The messages opened. Jessica. Is the old virgin signing papers yet? Jessica. Tell me you sealed the deal last night. Jessica. She's so desperate it's pathetic. But hey, easiest $2.3 million you'll ever make. My legs gave out. I grabbed the counter to keep from falling, but the spatula clattered to the floor. The sound echoed in the kitchen like a gunshot. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. Open the conversation. Some voice in my head, calm and cold, the businesswoman who'd negotiated million-dollar deals, told me to open the full conversation, get proof, get everything. I scrolled up. Tyrone. Mission accomplished. She's completely hooked. Jessica. Did you close your eyes and think of the $2.3 million Tyrone? Had to. God, you have no idea how hard this is, but we're almost there. Jessica. Poor thing probably thinks you actually love her. Tyrone. She does. It's kind of sad, actually. She cried after. The shower turned off. I heard him moving around in the bathroom. Keep scrolling. The cold voice again. Get it all. I scrolled faster, my vision blurring with tears. Tyrone. Found the will. She has $2.3 million total. Real estate, investments, everything. If I can get her to update it before she figures this out. Jessica. And if she does figure it out? Tyrone. She won't. She's too desperate. Too grateful that someone finally wants her. It's actually kind of perfect. She's done all our work for us. No family, no real friends, completely isolated. Further up, photos of me, labeled The Mark. Me at the art museum, looking at that Monet. Me laughing at dinner. Me sleeping in my bed, our bed, taken without my knowledge. And then messages about someone else. Tyrone. Margaret signed everything 2 weeks before she figured it out. Would have worked perfectly if her daughter hadn't shown up early. Jessica. How much did we get? Tyrone. Only $47,000 before we had to bail, but this one's better. Eleanor's got way more and she's completely alone. No one's coming to save her. Margaret. They'd done this before. To someone else. Some other lonely woman who'd thought she'd found love. The bathroom door opened. I heard his footsteps in the hallway. Think, Eleanor. You built an empire from nothing. You survived your parents' death. You survived 35 years of loneliness. You can survive this. But first, you need proof. My hands stopped shaking. That cold businesswoman voice took over completely. I opened my email on his phone, sent myself the entire conversation thread, all the photos, everything. Deleted the sent email from his phone, cleared the browser history, put the phone back exactly where it had been, face down on the counter. The spatula was still on the floor. I picked it up, placed it in the sink. Morning, beautiful. His voice came from behind me. I turned to face him, and somehow, God knows how, I smiled. Morning, I said, and my voice sounded normal, warm even. How was that possible when everything inside me was screaming? Tyrone crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around me from behind, kissing my neck. The same spot he'd kissed last night, when I'd thought it meant something. When I'd thought I meant something. What are you making? He asked. I was going to make pancakes, to celebrate. The word tasted like poison. Celebrate what? Us. Last night. Everything. I forced myself to lean back against him, to not flinch away from his touch. But I'm not really feeling it anymore. Maybe we could just grab bagels or something? You okay? You seem off. I turned in his arms, looked up at that handsome face, those concerned eyes that were so good at lying. I'm perfect, just a little sore. I added a shy smile, the kind that would make him think I was embarrassed about the intimacy. In a good way. He grinned. Well, that's what I like to hear. His phone buzzed on the counter and I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. I should check that. Might be a client. Of course. I watched him grab the phone, watched him read Jessica's messages, watched him type a response, all while maintaining that easy smile. Client rescheduled, he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. Looks like I've got the morning free. Want to do something? Maybe take a drive up the coast? That sounds nice. It didn't. It sounded like torture. But I needed time. Time to think, to plan, to figure out how to destroy him without destroying myself in the process. We got bagels. We drove up the coast. He held my hand, pointed out beautiful views, told me he loved me. And I smiled and nodded and played the part of the woman who believed him. Because here's what con artists forget. Successful businesswomen know all about playing parts. We sit in meetings with men who underestimate us and smile while planning how to outmaneuver them. We negotiate with people who think we're pushy while maintaining perfect composure. We build empires in a man's world by being better, smarter, and more ruthless than they ever expect. Tyrone Miller thought he was playing me, but now I knew the game, and I was going to play it better. That afternoon, while Tyrone was supposedly at the gym, probably actually meeting with Jessica to celebrate their successful con, I sat in my home office and forwarded every screenshot to a new email address I'd created, backed them up to a cloud drive, made copies of copies. Then I called the one person I knew could help me without judgment. "Rebecca, it's Eleanor Anderson. I need your help, and Tyrone can't know." Rebecca had been head of security for my company for 8 years. She'd seen me through hostile takeover attempts, corporate espionage, aggressive competitors. If anyone could help me navigate this, it was her. "What's going on?" Her voice was immediately alert. "I need you to review security footage from my house, specifically any time I was traveling in the last 3 months, and I need a private investigator, the best one you know." "Eleanor, what happened?" "I'll explain everything when we meet. But Rebecca, this needs to be airtight, legal, documented, undeniable. Can you do that?" "Consider it done. Are you safe?" Was I safe? I was living with a man who'd manipulated me, stolen from me, planned to take everything I had. But physically safe? Probably. I was worth more to him alive and signing papers than dead. For now. But we need to move fast. We met at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere Tyrone might be. Rebecca brought her laptop, and I brought my rage. "Show me what you have," she said. I pulled up the screenshots, watched her face harden as she read through them. "Jesus Christ, Eleanor, how long has this been going on?" 3 months. "But Rebecca, look at this." I scrolled to the messages about Margaret. "They've done this before, and I bet she's not the only one." Rebecca's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Give me 3 hours. I'll have everything on this guy and his accomplice." It took 2. "Eleanor, you need to see this." She turned her laptop toward me. Security footage from my house, my bedroom. Tyrone and Jessica, a blonde woman I'd never met, in my bed. Our bed. While I'd been at a conference in Chicago, they were going through my financial documents, photographing them, laughing. "There's more," Rebecca said grimly. She clicked another file. More footage. Them in my office, at my desk, going through my files. Looking for the will, probably. Looking for account information. "They brought her into my house," I whispered. "Into my bedroom. Multiple times. The footage goes back weeks." Rebecca's jaw was tight. "Eleanor, I ran background checks. Jessica Winters, 28 years old. 2 prior fraud convictions, both involving older men. Tyrone Miller, his real name at least, failed actor with $150,000 in debt to some very dangerous people. He needed my money to pay off his debts. More than that." Rebecca pulled up more files. "I found 3 other women, all between 60 and 75, all widows or lifelong singles, all approached by Tyrone at charity events or country clubs. Margaret Chen, they got $47,000 before her daughter intervened. Patricia Dawson, $83,000 over 6 months. Susan Rodriguez, $125,000. She's still paying off the debt he left her with." Susan. The same name as one of my friends. Different person, but God, it could have been her. Could have been any lonely woman who just wanted to be loved. "What do I do?" I asked. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "Legally, you go to the police right now. You have evidence of fraud, theft, possibly conspiracy. They'd arrest him today." But prosecution takes time. He'd get a lawyer, probably make bail, and you'd have to relive this in court while he spins some story about how you were a willing participant. His lawyer would argue you gave him access to everything voluntarily, that you're just a bitter older woman who regrets a relationship with a younger man. The thought made me sick. So what's the alternative? You play him better than he's playing you. You become the victim he thinks you are. You let him think he's winning, and you gather enough evidence that when the hammer drops, there's no way out. I thought about it. About spending more time with him, pretending to love him, letting him touch me. My stomach turned. But I thought about Margaret, Patricia, Susan, about the next woman he'd find after me, about the fact that if I acted now, he might get away with a slap on the wrist and be back at it in a few years. How long would I have to pretend? However long it takes to build an airtight case. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. But Eleanor, you can't let him know you suspect anything. One wrong look, one offhand comment, and he'll bolt, and you'll never get your money back. I straightened my shoulders, channeled that businesswoman who'd faced down corporate sharks. Then I'll give him exactly what he wants. I'll be the desperate, trusting old woman who's so grateful for his love that she'll sign anything. Rebecca smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Now you're thinking like someone who built a $2.3 million empire. Have you ever had to kiss someone who makes your skin crawl? To smile at them over breakfast while planning their destruction? To whisper, "I love you," while thinking, "I hope you rot in prison"? That was my life for the next month. The hardest part wasn't the acting. I'd been performing for 35 years, the successful businesswoman who had it all together, the woman who wasn't dying of loneliness inside. What was one more performance? The hardest part was letting him think he'd won, letting him see vulnerability where I'd built walls, becoming the desperate, needy woman he thought I was. "I've been thinking," I said one morning over the coffee he'd made. He made it perfectly now, vanilla latte, extra foam. Funny how quickly you can learn someone's preferences when you're planning to rob them. About us, about the future. "Yeah?" He sat down across from me, taking my hand. The touch still made my stomach turn, but I'd gotten good at hiding it. "I want to set up a joint savings account, not just for household expenses, but for us, for our future together." I looked down, playing shy. "I know we haven't talked about marriage or anything, but I've never felt this way about anyone, and I want to build something with you." I watched his eyes light up, watched him hide it quickly behind concern. "Eleanor, are you sure? That's a big step." "I'm sure. I'm 55 years old, Tyrone. I've spent my whole life building wealth with no one to share it with. What's the point of having money if you can't use it to build a life with someone you love?" Hook, line, and sinker. We opened the account that afternoon. I deposited $25,000. "We can use it for anything we want," I told him. "Vacations, investments, whatever feels right." Within 3 days, he'd withdrawn $18,000. "Hey, babe," he said when I casually mentioned it. "I saw this investment opportunity. Bitcoin mining operation supposed to triple our money in 6 months. I figured it was worth putting some of our savings into it." Our savings. Money I'd earned over decades was now ours in his mind. "That sounds great," I said, smiling. "I trust your judgment." What he didn't know was that Rebecca had installed new cameras. Tiny, hidden, absolutely invisible. Every room in the house now recorded in high definition. Every conversation was captured, every theft documented. And what he really didn't know was that David Chen, the private investigator Rebecca had hired, was documenting his every move outside the house, too. David was good. Former FBI, specialized in financial crimes, looked like someone's grandfather. He could tail Tyrone without being noticed, and he could dig up dirt that would make a cemetery look clean. "He's meeting with Jessica twice a week," David reported during one of our clandestine meetings at a hotel downtown. "Coffee shops, her apartment, once at a motel. They're planning something big." "The will," I said. "He's been pushing me to update it. Add him as primary beneficiary." "Don't. Not yet. We need them to make their move in a controlled environment where we can document everything. So what do? You agree, you schedule the appointment, but you schedule it with someone we choose, someone who can help us build the case. That's when David brought in the FBI. Agent Sarah Morrison looked nothing like what I expected. She was in her 40s, dressed in jeans and a blazer, with kind eyes that had probably seen too much. We met in a secure office downtown, just the three of us. Ms. Anderson, I've reviewed everything Mr. Chen has gathered. The evidence is substantial, but I'm going to be honest with you. These cases are tricky. Fraud involving romantic relationships often comes down to intent, and good defense lawyers can argue that you were a willing participant. I wasn't willing. I was manipulated. I believe you. But we need to prove it beyond reasonable doubt. We need them to explicitly state their criminal intent on record. We need them to make moves that can't be explained away as a relationship gone bad. I leaned forward. What do you need from me? A few more weeks of what you've been doing. Let him think he's winning. Let him get comfortable, arrogant even. And when he asks you to sign documents, when, not if, we'll set up a controlled environment where we can record everything, get full confessions. How many more weeks? Agent Morrison's expression softened. I know this is hard. I know you're living with someone who's violated your trust in the worst possible way. But Tyrone Miller and Jessica Winters are part of a larger pattern. We've identified 7 women they've targeted. If we can build a solid case, we can put them away for a long time and prevent them from doing this to anyone else. 7 women. Not 3. 7. Tell me what to do, I said. So I did. I became the perfect mark. I stopped questioning strange charges. I asked his opinion on everything. I deferred to his judgment. I became smaller, quieter, more dependent, and Tyrone became bolder. You know what I was thinking? He said one night after I'd made his favorite dinner. We should get married. My heart stopped, not from joy, from the sheer audacity of it. Really? Yeah, I mean, we're already living together, already building a life. Why not make it official? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. The ring inside was from a mall jewelry store, probably cost $200, a tiny cubic zirconia that wouldn't fool anyone. I know it's not much, he said, looking appropriately sheepish, but someday I'll get you the ring you deserve, a real diamond, something that shows the world how much you mean to me. I let myself cry. Not because I was happy, because I was so angry I could barely see straight, but he read it as joy. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. We were engaged for 2 weeks before he made his real move. It happened after David had given me particularly damning evidence. Tyrone had been recorded on his phone, standing in my driveway talking to Jessica. She's signing everything Friday, he'd said. After this, we're set. We can finally stop pretending. How are you holding up? Jessica's voice had come through the recording. I know this one's been harder. She's so pathetic, it's almost uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. But $2.3 million is worth being uncomfortable for a few months. Plus, she actually thinks I'm going to marry her. She'll be too embarrassed to report anything when this is over. Who'd believe the 55-year-old virgin thought a guy like me actually loved her? They'd laughed. Both of them. Laughed at the pathetic old woman who'd been desperate enough to believe she deserved love. I'd listened to that recording 3 times. Each time, something inside me hardened a little more. Eleanor? Tyrone said that night as we were getting ready for bed. I talked to that estate lawyer friend of mine, the one who helped us with the will update. He says we should set up some other documents. Power of attorney, medical directives, property transfers, just to make everything clean, especially with us getting married. Okay, I said simply. Really? You're not worried about it being too fast? I turned to face him, put on my most trusting expression. Tyrone, you're going to be my husband. Of course I trust you with these things. When should we meet with him? Friday, 10 a.m., his office downtown? Perfect. I kissed him, forcing myself not to think about where that mouth had been, who else he'd kissed with these same lies. I love you. I love you too, babe. Liar. But in 2 days, everyone would know it. Friday morning arrived with the kind of clear, bright sunshine that seemed designed to mock the darkness of what was about to happen. I got dressed carefully, professional but not intimidating. The kind of outfit that said successful but vulnerable. Tyrone was practically vibrating with excitement. He thought he'd won. Thought that in a few hours he'd have legal control over everything I'd built. "You seem happy," I observed as we got into my car. His was in the shop. It had been in the shop for 6 weeks. Convenient. "I'm always happy when I'm with you." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Plus, after today, everything will be official. We'll be a real team." A real team. Right. The kind of team where one member robs the other blind. The lawyer's office was perfect. Agent Morrison had rented actual office space, had it decorated with impressive-looking diplomas, law books, the works. The receptionist was an undercover agent. The documents spread across the mahogany desk were real enough to fool anyone who wasn't reading them carefully. And hidden in the ceiling tiles, the ventilation system, even the desk lamp, cameras and microphones recording everything in high definition. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Anderson, welcome." The man playing the lawyer, actually another FBI agent, stood to greet us. Distinguished-looking, silver hair, expensive suit. He looked like someone who'd been practicing law for 40 years. "I'm Theodore Hartley. Please, have a seat." We sat. Tyrone on the edge of his chair, eager. Me with my hands folded in my lap, playing the trusting fool. "Now, I've prepared all the documents we discussed," Hartley said, spreading papers across his desk. "The power of attorney, which gives Mr. Miller authority to make financial and medical decisions on your behalf. The property transfer documents, which will put the house and your investment properties in joint ownership. And the updated will, making Mr. Miller your primary beneficiary." He said it all so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing a simple business transaction, not the complete transfer of my life's work to a con artist. "This is quite comprehensive," Hartley continued. "Mr. Miller, you'll essentially have complete control over Ms. Anderson's $2.3 million estate. Do you understand the responsibility that entails?" "Absolutely," Tyrone said, and I could hear the barely suppressed excitement in his voice. "Eleanor and I are partners. I would never do anything to hurt her or her interests." "And Ms. Anderson, you're comfortable with this level of trust?" I nodded, played my part. "Completely. Tyrone is going to be my husband. We're building a life together." "Very well. Mr. Miller, if you could sign here, acknowledging that you understand the scope of these documents." Tyrone signed without hesitation. His signature was bold, confident. The signature of a man who thought he'd just won the lottery. "Ms. Anderson, I'll need your signature here, here, and here." I picked up the pen, held it over the first signature line, let it hover there for a long moment. Then I put it down. "Actually, I have a question." Tyrone tensed, just slightly, but I saw it. "Of course," Hartley said. "What would you like to know?" "These documents give Tyrone complete control over my $2.3 million estate, correct?" "That's correct." "And if something were to happen to me unexpectedly, an accident, a sudden illness, he would inherit everything?" "As your primary beneficiary and power of attorney holder, yes." I turned to Tyrone, looked him directly in the eyes. "That's interesting, because I found some text messages on your phone." All the color drained from his face. Messages about the old virgin signing papers, about how desperate and pathetic I am, about the $2.3 million you were about to make. My voice was calm, cold, the voice I used in boardrooms when I was about to destroy someone's negotiating position. "Eleanor, I can explain. Can you explain the photos of me labeled The Mark? Or the security footage of you and Jessica in my bed while I was in Chicago? Or the $47,000 you've stolen from various accounts over the last 3 months?" He lunged for the door. Made it about 2 steps before it opened and Agent Morrison walked in, flanked by 2 other FBI agents. "Tyrone Miller, you're under arrest for wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and theft." She was already pulling out handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." "Eleanor!" Tyrone spun toward me, all pretense dropped. His face was a mask of panic and rage. "Eleanor, please, tell them this is a misunderstanding. We love each other." I stood up, walked over to him, looked into those eyes that had seemed so sincere just hours ago. "We never loved each other, Tyrone. Love requires honesty. You've been honest about exactly one thing. I am pathetic. I was pathetic enough to believe that someone could love me. But you know what's more pathetic?" I leaned in close. A 32-year-old man who peaked in high school, who's so desperate and talentless that his only option is to prey on lonely women. A man so worthless that even his own accomplice can barely stand to touch him. You didn't close your eyes and think of the money when you were with me, Tyrone. I read those messages. You closed your eyes because even $2.3 million wasn't enough to make being with me bearable. I straightened up, stepped back. That's the only true thing in this entire relationship. We were both pretending. The difference is, I'm the better actor. Agent Morrison finished reading Tyrone his rights while another agent cuffed him. I watched his face cycle through emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, desperation. "This is insane," he shouted. "Eleanor, baby, please, I love you. Everything we had was real. Yes, I made some mistakes, but—" "Save it for your lawyer," Agent Morrison said, already guiding him toward the door. "We have 3 months of recorded conversations, financial records, surveillance footage, and testimony from 3 other victims. Your mistakes are federal crimes." Another agent entered, leading Jessica Winters in handcuffs. This was my first time seeing her in person, the woman who'd been in my bed, who'd laughed at the pathetic old virgin with my fiancé. She was younger than I'd expected, pretty in that generic Instagram way, and when she saw Tyrone, her face transformed into pure fury. "You idiot!" she screamed at him. "You said she was clueless. You said there was no way she'd figure it out." "Shut up, Jessica. Shut up. We're caught, Tyrone. We're going to prison because you couldn't keep your mouth shut and had to brag on the phone." "Ms. Winters," Agent Morrison interrupted, "save it for interrogation. You'll have plenty of time to blame each other there." As they dragged them both toward the door, Tyrone made one last attempt. He looked at me with those eyes that had seemed so sincere, so full of love. "Eleanor, I know you're angry, but think about what you're doing. Do you really want to be responsible for sending your fiancé to prison? We were going to be married. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I walked up to him slowly. Let him hope for just a second that I might waver. "You're not my fiancé, Tyrone. You're just a pathetic man who thought he could exploit a lonely woman's desperation for love. But here's what you didn't count on. That lonely woman built a multi-million-dollar empire. She negotiated with sharks. She survived loss and loneliness that would have broken weaker people. She's smarter, stronger, and infinitely more ruthless than you ever imagined." I leaned in close enough that only he could hear. "I hope prison teaches you something I clearly failed to. Underestimate women at your own risk." They led him out. The last thing I heard was Jessica screaming, "This is all your fault. I told you we should have left after we got the first 50,000. When the door closed behind them, the room fell silent. Agent Morrison, the fake lawyer, the undercover receptionist, they were all looking at me with something that might have been admiration. "Ms. Anderson," Agent Morrison said gently, "are you all right?" Was I all right? I just watched the man I thought I loved get arrested. The man who'd taken my virginity, who I'd imagined spending my life with, had been exposed as a fraud who could barely stand to touch me. "I'm fine," I said, and surprisingly, I was. What happens now? The news broke within hours. Romance scam ring busted. FBI arrests couple in elaborate fraud scheme. My name was kept out of it initially, protected as a victim, but within days the story exploded. Because it wasn't just me. It wasn't even just the 3 women David had found. Agent Morrison called me 2 days after the arrest. "Eleanor, we need to talk. Can you come to the field office?" I went, expecting to give another statement. Instead, she showed me a conference room with a massive board covered in photos, names, and connecting lines. "Since the arrest, 7 more women have come forward." She pointed to the board. 7, all between the ages of 58 and 76, all approached at charity events, country clubs, or online dating sites, all swept off their feet by Tyrone, sometimes with Jessica playing the supportive friend who'd vouch for what a great guy he was. I stared at the photos. 10 women total, including me. 10 lonely women who'd thought they'd finally found love. How much did they steal? Conservatively, about $800,000 total over 3 years, but it's more than money. Agent Morrison pulled up a chair, gestured for me to sit. 2 of these women attempted suicide after Tyrone disappeared with their savings. One lost her home. Another is still paying off debt he accumulated in her name. You stopped this, Eleanor. Your willingness to endure those extra weeks of pretending, of gathering evidence, you saved who knows how many future victims. I looked at the faces on the board. Margaret Chen, 71, Patricia Dawson, 68, Susan Rodriguez, 64, names I'd heard before, and others. Diane Matthews, 62, Carol Johnson, 59. "Can I meet them?" I asked. "The other women?" Agent Morrison smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask. They've been asking about you, too. The one who finally caught him. They want to say thank you." We met the following week at a community center Agent Morrison had secured. 10 women, all of us carrying the same wound, the same shame, the same rage. Margaret Chen spoke first. She was tiny, elegant, with silver hair and fierce eyes. "I'm Margaret. Tyrone took $47,000 from me before my daughter figured out what was happening. I blamed myself for years. Thought I was stupid, desperate, pathetic, all the things he called you in those messages. I'm Patricia." A tall woman with kind eyes stepped forward. "He got $83,000 from me, told me we were investing in a restaurant together. I didn't find out until months later that there was no restaurant, just him and Jessica living off my money." One by one, they introduced themselves, shared their stories, and with each story, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just my shame to carry. This wasn't just my failure. This was a systematic predator who'd weaponized loneliness. "I'm Eleanor," I said when it was my turn. "I was engaged to Tyrone for 2 weeks. I thought I'd finally found someone who could love me despite everything, despite being 55 and alone and never having been kissed. He made me feel like I was worth something beyond my bank account." "But you caught him," Margaret said. "You got evidence. You got justice for all of us." "I got lucky. I saw a text message I wasn't supposed to see." "No," Patricia said firmly. "You got smart. You didn't run to the police immediately. You didn't confront him and give him a chance to disappear. You built a case. You played him better than he played you." Susan Rodriguez, a beautiful Latina woman with graying hair, added, "And you're going to help us make sure he stays in prison. All of us testifying, all of our evidence. He's never going to do this again." That's when it started. Not just a group of victims, but a support system. We exchanged phone numbers, created a group chat, made plans to meet monthly. Some of us became close friends. Margaret and I started having weekly coffee dates. Patricia invited me to her book club. For the first time since my parents died, I had a community. People who understood. People who didn't judge. The trial started 6 months after the arrest. The prosecution called it an open and shut case. The defense called it a tragic misunderstanding involving consenting adults. Tyrone's lawyer was exactly what I expected. Slick, expensive, someone who specialized in making guilty people look sympathetic. His strategy was simple. paint Tyrone as a man who'd genuinely fallen for these women, who'd made some poor financial decisions, but never intended to commit fraud. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said in his opening statement, "my client stands accused of fraud. But what the prosecution calls fraud, we call a relationship. A series of relationships with mature, intelligent women who made their own choices about how to spend their money and who to share their lives with." I sat in the gallery watching him spin his web of lies and felt nothing but contempt. These women weren't manipulated. They were in love. And now, bitter about relationships that didn't work out, they've decided to punish my client for the crime of being a younger man who briefly brought joy into their lives. Margaret, sitting next to me, grabbed my hand and squeezed. Then the prosecution began presenting evidence. They started with the text messages, projected them on a screen for the entire courtroom to see. "Is the old virgin signing papers yet? She's so desperate it's pathetic. Easiest $2.3 million I'll ever make." I watched the jury's faces change, watched sympathy for the misunderstood young man evaporate as they read message after message of calculated cruelty. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Chen, no relation to Margaret, walked them through every piece of evidence: the surveillance footage of Tyrone and Jessica in my house, the financial records showing systematic theft, the recordings of phone conversations where they explicitly discuss their con. But the most damaging evidence was the testimony from the other victims. Patricia went first, described how Tyrone had courted her for months, proposed marriage, convinced her to invest in a business opportunity that never existed. "Did you give him this money freely?" Catherine asked. "I gave it because I loved him, because I trusted him, because he told me we were building a future together." Patricia's voice broke. "I had no idea there was another woman. I had no idea he was stealing from me. I had no idea that every word out of his mouth was a lie." Margaret testified next, told the jury how her own daughter had to intervene, how she'd nearly lost everything before the truth came out. "Mrs. Chen, did Mr. Miller ever express genuine affection for you?" "I thought he did. But after seeing the messages he sent to Ms. Winters about me, about all of us, messages where he called us marks and easy targets and laughed about having to close his eyes when he touched us, I realized he never felt anything but contempt." One by one, the women testified, and one by one, they dismantled Tyrone's defense. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand with my head held high. I'd worn my best suit, the one I wore to my most important business meetings. I wanted the jury to see me as I really was, not a desperate, pathetic victim, but a successful woman who'd been targeted by a professional predator. Catherine took me through the timeline, the charity auction, the courtship, the manipulation. "Ms. Anderson, can you tell the jury about the night you discovered the truth?" I took a deep breath. We'd just been intimate for the first time. It was the morning after. I was in the kitchen, planning to make him breakfast, feeling happier than I'd felt in my entire life. His phone buzzed with a text message. What did the message say? "Is the old virgin signing papers yet?" A ripple went through the courtroom. I saw several jury members flinch. How did that make you feel? Devastated, humiliated, like the biggest fool who ever lived. I looked directly at Tyrone, who was sitting at the defense table trying to look remorseful. But then I got angry, because I realized something. He'd targeted me specifically because I was vulnerable, because I'd never dated, never been loved, never learned to recognize the red flags. He weaponized my loneliness. Catherine approached the jury box. "Ms. Anderson, the defense has argued that you were a willing participant in a relationship that simply didn't work out. What do you say to that?" I was willing to be in a relationship. I was willing to love and trust someone. What I wasn't willing to do, what none of us were willing to do, was fund a con artist's lifestyle, while he and his accomplice laughed at how desperate we were. That's not a relationship. That's elder abuse. That's fraud. That's a crime. The defense attorney tried to shake my testimony on cross-examination. Ms. Anderson, isn't it true that you gave Mr. Miller access to your accounts voluntarily? I gave my fiancé access to a shared household account, yes. What I didn't give him was permission to steal $47,000. But you're a successful businesswoman. Surely you noticed these transactions. I noticed, and when I asked about them, he lied. Consistently, elaborately, and convincingly. That's what makes him good at this. That's what makes him dangerous. Dangerous? Isn't that a bit dramatic? He never threatened you, did he? I leaned forward. He threatened my financial security, my emotional well-being, and my ability to trust. He stole my virginity under false pretenses. He made me believe I was finally worthy of love, and then I found out he could barely stand to touch me. If you don't think that's dangerous, you've never been a lonely woman in a world that tells you your value expires at 50. The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney quickly moved on. When all the testimony was complete, when all the evidence had been presented, the jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of wondering if a jury would believe 10 women over one charming man. 3 days of remembering every legal case where women weren't believed, where con artists walked free, where victims were blamed for their own victimization. On the 3rd day, we got the call. We all gathered in the courtroom, all 10 of us sitting together, holding hands. The jury filed in. I tried to read their faces, but they were carefully neutral. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of wire fraud in the 1st degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of elder abuse? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud? Guilty. Charge after charge. Guilty. 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 I felt Margaret squeeze my hand so tight it hurt, felt Patricia's tears on my shoulder as she hugged me, heard Susan's whispered, "Thank God." Jessica received the same verdicts. The jury had seen through every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to paint them as misunderstood lovers rather than calculating predators. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge looked at Tyrone with undisguised contempt. Mr. Miller, you systematically targeted vulnerable women. You exploited their loneliness, their desire for companionship, their trust. You didn't just steal their money, you stole their ability to believe in love, in goodness, in their own worth. The financial damage you've caused is significant, but the emotional damage is incalculable. She sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Jessica got 8 years. I hope, the judge concluded, that you spend every day of your sentence thinking about the women whose lives you've destroyed, and I hope you emerge from prison a different person, though I have my doubts. As they led him away, Tyrone looked at me one last time. No more pretense of love, no more manipulation, just pure hatred. Good. I'd rather be hated honestly than loved dishonestly. 6 months after the trial, I sold the mansion. Couldn't live there anymore. Too many ghosts, too many memories of feeling pathetic in my own home. I bought a small cottage by the ocean, 2 bedrooms, big windows, the sound of waves instead of silence. I used part of the restitution money. They'd managed to recover about $400,000 from Tyrone's accounts to start the Eleanor Anderson Fund for Elder Abuse Prevention. We provide legal assistance, counseling, and education to seniors about romance scams. Margaret serves as co-director. Patricia runs the support groups. Susan manages community outreach. We speak at senior centers, community colleges, anywhere people will listen. We tell our stories, not with shame, but with strength. Not as cautionary tales, but as survival stories. Romance scammers target lonely people, I tell audiences. They look for vulnerability, isolation, and they weaponize the human need for connection. But being targeted doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. I still have hard days. Days when I wonder if I'll ever be able to trust again. Days when the humiliation of being called the old virgin burns fresh. Days when I remember how it felt to believe I was loved, only to discover it was all performance. But I also have good days, more and more of them. About a year after the trial, Margaret insisted I join a dating app. Eleanor, you can't let Tyrone steal your future along with everything else. There are good men out there. I'll run background checks on all of them, I joked. That's not actually a bad idea. So I created a profile. Honest, straightforward. 55-year-old successful businesswoman. Been hurt but not broken. Looking for someone genuine. Yes, I will Google you. Yes, I will be cautious. If that scares you, swipe left. I got surprisingly few matches, which was fine. Quality over quantity. One of them was David. Not David Chen, the private investigator. David Martinez, 57-year-old literature professor, widowed 3 years. His profile was just as honest as mine. Lost my wife to cancer. Took time to grieve. Ready to try again, but I'm rusty and cautious. If you're patient, I might be worth it. Our first date was coffee. Of course it was coffee. We met at a busy cafe in broad daylight. I'd given Rebecca his full name, birth date, and license plate number, half joking about needing an emergency extraction plan. David was nothing like Tyrone. Shorter, rounder, with gray in his beard and laugh lines around his eyes. He wore a cardigan with elbow patches, for God's sake. He looked like someone who alphabetized his bookshelves and had strong opinions about Oxford commas. He was perfect. So, he said after we'd ordered, I have to admit I Googled you. I know about the trial, about Tyrone Miller. I want you to know I'm not him. I'm not after your money. I have my own retirement fund, my own house, my own life. I'm here because your profile made me laugh, and because I think maybe we could be friends who occasionally have dinner together and argue about books. I smiled. I ran a background check on you. I assumed you would. Find anything interesting? You have 4 speeding tickets from the 1990s, and you're 3 months behind on your library fees. In my defense, I'm still reading those books. We talked for 3 hours, about books, about loss, about the terror of dating after being alone. He told me about his wife, Maria, and how grief had nearly consumed him. I told him about Tyrone, about the trial, about learning to trust again. I'll be honest, he said as we walked to our cars. I'm probably going to mess this up. I'm rusty at dating. I'll probably recommend books you hate and bore you with stories about dead poets and forget important dates. And I'll probably be paranoid and suspicious and run background checks on your friends and family and need constant reassurance that you're not secretly plotting to steal my money. That seems fair. He smiled. So want to do this again? Maybe I'll mess up and you'll be paranoid and we'll both survive it? I'd like that. We've been dating for 4 months now, taking it slow, very slow. Haven't even kissed yet, and I'm okay with that. We have dinner twice a week, text daily, and he's never once asked about my finances. Last week, he gave me a book of poetry by Mary Oliver. Inside, he'd written, "For Eleanor, who built an empire and rebuilt herself. Both are equally impressive." I cried reading that inscription, but happy tears this time. It's been 2 years since that morning I discovered Tyrone's messages. 2 years since my world shattered and I had to rebuild myself from the broken pieces. Some things have changed. I live by the ocean now, in a house that feels like mine, not a mausoleum. I have real friends, women who understand what I've been through because they've been through it too. I run a foundation that helps other victims, that turns my pain into something meaningful. Some things haven't changed. I'm still cautious, still suspicious, still carrying that voice in my head that says, "You're not worthy of real love." But that voice is quieter now. Tyrone Miller is in year 2 of his 15-year sentence. I don't think about him much anymore. Don't wonder what he's doing, how he's coping, whether he's learned anything. He's become what he always was, irrelevant to my life. What he took from me, my virginity, my money, my ability to trust easily, those things mattered. They still matter. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take my strength. He didn't take my dignity. He didn't take my ability to rebuild, to help others, to keep trying. Last night, David and I walked on the beach near my cottage. The sun was setting. painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He was talking about some obscure poet I'd never heard of, gesticulating wildly with his hands the way he does when he's passionate about something. And I realized something. I was happy. Not the desperate, grateful happiness I'd felt with Tyrone, the I can't believe someone wants me happiness that had been built on lies, real happiness, the kind that comes from being yourself with someone who likes who you are, who isn't trying to change you or use you or manipulate you, who's just there, with all his quirks and flaws, wanting to be there. David, I interrupted his poetry monologue. Yeah? Thank you. For what? Boring you with poetry? For being real, for being honest, for being someone I don't have to run a background check on every week to feel safe. I mean, you can still run background checks if it makes you feel better. I haven't gotten any new speeding tickets, but I did finally pay those library fees. I laughed. God, it felt good to laugh. If someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd lose my virginity at 55, fall for a con artist, help send him to prison, and eventually find something that might actually be love with a divorce literature professor who wears cardigans, I'd have thought they were insane. But here I am, 56 years old, living in a cottage by the ocean, running a foundation that helps other women, dating a good man who moves at my pace, surrounded by friends who understand. Some women wait their whole lives for a prince to save them. I became my own queen, built my own kingdom, defended it from invaders. And when it was time, I opened the gates to let the right person in, on my terms, at my pace, with my boundaries firmly in place. Tyrone Miller tried to destroy me. He took my virginity, my money, months of my life. He made me question everything about myself, but he couldn't take the thing that mattered most, my ability to survive, to fight back, to rebuild. He's in prison. I'm free. And that, I think, is the best revenge of all. This is my story. The story of how I lost my virginity at 55 to a con artist, and how I made sure he paid for every lie, every manipulation, every moment he made me feel worthless. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself, if you're lonely, if someone seems too good to be true, if you're being isolated from friends or pressured about finances, please reach out. To the Eleanor Anderson Fund, to local resources, to someone you trust. You deserve real love, real respect, real partnership, and if you don't find it, you can still build a beautiful life. Trust me, I'm living proof. Thank you for listening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with a literature professor who wants to argue about whether Wordsworth is overrated. Spoiler alert, he absolutely is. So here's my question for you, and I really want to know, what red flags have you ignored in your life? Maybe not in romance, maybe in friendship, in business, in family. We all have that moment where we knew something was wrong, but chose to believe the lie anyway. Drop it in the comments. And if you've never ignored a red flag in your life, you're either lying or a superhero. Either way, hit that like button and tell me your secret. Which city are you watching from? Let's connect in the comments below.